Hi folks, Frank Connors again, and I'm coming to you from the second floor beautiful deck on Jill's Crow's Nest down on the coast of Maine. Hope you're having a great day. It's the 1st of May. The story I'm reading today from Speaking Frankly is called Chucking Woodchucks. And I selected it this morning because this morning I shot my first woodchuck. Don't tell Abby. Here we go. How much wood would a woodchuck chuck if a woodchuck could chuck wood? That's a pretty old, if senseless question. Sure, you've heard it. A better question to ponder, perhaps, is if a woodchuck could chuck wood, would it even bother? I want to suggest right here that there are very few creatures on our wonderful earth that are as useless and lazy as a woodchuck. I mean, if they weren't sort of on the right side of cute, cuddly, and maybe foolish looking, would they have any use at all? The first pesky woodchucks we see each season are out on the interstate. Zing go the cars, fat sit the woodchucks on some sun-soaked slope. I consider it a blessing when the two paths intersect and the woodchuck wishes it had stayed off the road. Sorry if that seems a bit unchristian, but I don't like them and I just have no use for them. When I first came home from the war, one of the first things I did to decompress was to spend a long week with an old army buddy up in Troy, New York. I was desperate. I hadn't met Jane yet. He was a budding French and Indian war reenactor and the proud owner of several ponderous muzzle-loading rifles. It was spring. It became my habit to celebrate late into the evenings and early the next morning to rise and go woodchucking up in the fields above Lake St. George. I had left Vietnam with the expectation that my days of belly crawling through fields were over. But I need to confess that I got right back into it with Bob. We had moved like snakes from one mound to the next, actually relishing the smell of the dandelions and the fresh grasses as they crushed under our noses and chins. We simply waited for some overweight woody to emerge to catch some rays and boom, boom. Our weapons would belch in almost perfect unison. Maybe you've never fired a muzzle loader from the prone position. Hope you haven't. Properly loaded, the thing might push you sideways an inch or three. But Bob never loaded one of those things properly in his life. If it don't kick, it can't kill, Bob used to say. Then he'd splash in a little extra black powder and tamp it down. If we fired 6 times a morning, we had a half dozen bruises on our bodies by nightfall. And I need to tell you right now, we never even bruised a woodchuck. A muzzle loader fires in a two-step process. Flashing powder in a pan ignites powder in the barrel that explodes the charge, and there isn't a woodchuck alive that can't turn and get down a hole between those two steps. But we had fun. It was spring after all, and we were young. But to this day, I want to believe we may have scared more than one woodchuck right to death. If a woodchuck sets up residence in one of my town cemeteries, they become my problem, since I'm still the town sexton. Have you ever fielded a phone call from a lady who has just visited the grave of her grandfather, only to find a big pile of dirt with a hip bone tossed on top? Well, I have. I fixed that chucker with a cherry bomb. You need to know, as you hurt these critters, that they always have one back, as you hunt these critters, that they always have one back door and probably 2. If you really want to get rid of woodchucks, you have to close off their escape holes and then do what you got to do. Woodchucks can also be a serious menace if you're trying to be a gardener. They have insatiable appetites and can lay waste to an unprotected garden in one night. If you just can't let one live in your neighborhood. Our little kitchen plot has suffered more than once at the chops of a woodchuck, and when given the latitude, I try to blame my daughter Abby. This girl is so tender-hearted, sometimes I catch myself wondering just where she came from. She's forbidden me to shoot a woodchuck if it was feeding off flowers on the front of our deck. I have to confess to shooting one or two when Abby wasn't looking, and I'll just continue to hope that she continues not to read my columns. I've tried to use heavy heart traps with no success. And here's another thing about woodchucks, folks. You'd never have only one. And they will not go away by themselves. So call a friend, do not call Abby, and go buy a muzzleloader for yourself. If you don't get rid of the woodchucks right now, you're in for a long, hot summer. Thanks for listening.